Hey, John Mark, I appreciate you coming in to
It's so
talk to
good to
us
be here.
today. Uh, I'd known about it from the pre-planning of the Space Force event coming to town, but you giving us the agenda of what happened, I really kind of noted out on that thing. It was really pretty interesting. So I kind of like the idea that it's kind of post-event. You can tell us more forensically what's going on, but it seemed like I know when you talked to the group I was with, it was kind of heady stuff, all this conversation about technology and space technology and innovation, all this kind of thing. It seems so far out there, but this really brings it home as far as what's going on right here at Baylor. You're a big part of bringing that together. Um, Seeing those planning conversations, I was like, gosh, it was hard to even understand some of it. But so the goal today, I just jotted it down because I don't want to miss it, is why should people care about this? Because it's kind of heady stuff. And then why did it come to Baylor in Central Texas?
Yeah.
And then thirdly, what does it mean for the future of industry and leadership along I-35 in the Central Texas corridor? I know that was a big part of the conversation too for us internally. But why is it happening here? So I'll just start off with, why should people care? Maybe
Yeah.
it's space innovation. Why do we care?
Yeah. There's space innovation. Why should local people care in Waco? Why should
Sure, yeah.
people abroad care? There's a lot of different reasons. I'll start off with one of my favorite discussions on why broadly people should care is when we talk about the U.S. military and you have your traditional branches, your Navy, Army, Air Force. I think the Navy and Army each have budgets of well over $300 billion each. And so when we create a aircraft carrier or a battleship and we put it out into the ocean, it is this $1 billion crazy structure
Hmm.
out there, armed to the teeth, and it's really cool. But it is completely unprotected in the modern age of space technology.
Yeah.
Just talking about where can missiles come from what directions? Or can they be hacked? Are they protected? What's encrypted? And so when the Space Force was originally created, Todd, under the first Trump administration, I mean, it in the works for a while. I remember hearing it and thinking that's a joke. And then there was actually a comedy show written about Space Force
Yeah.
just to like enhance the fact that it's a joke. But then you start getting to these meetings and you realize, oh, all of our systems are at risk because of the how we're not being defended in space. And so we might have $1 billion ship in the ocean, but if it's not protected, if the satellites are not encrypted, if the satellites are not protected, then
Yeah.
they're anyone can shoot them down. At our event on last Thursday, so the Space Force comes to town, and one of the discussions we had was about how our American missile system is basically created to defend from the northwest and the northeast, right? So in the theory, from
Mhm.
China or Russia, everything's going over the Arctic. But if missiles came from any other direction towards the United States,
Yeah.
we have no chance.
Yeah.
And it is a reality that there are satellites being armed. So it is a contested space. And if let's say a nuclear device came from space, we have no way to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
So
I heard a military person just say over the weekend when I was listening to that he wouldn't even go into the battlefield without eyes in the sky.
yeah,
And I was thinking, it's funny you said that about the Space Force because I thought the exact same thing. I was kind of a World War II history buff, and I kind of followed that stuff. And I thought, well, that's just kind of odd. I was thinking satellites shooting at each other. But now the eye in the sky is just out in space. It's just one level up. So it includes the Air Force for sure.
and
But it's just elevated to that's where it's all at.
yeah, and then every device you have on the ground. So if we're sending military personnel to Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever they are in the world, they have some type of location device,
Hmm.
GPS, whatever it is. Those are all connected to satellites.
Yes.
And so we're not independent like we used to be. It used to be the armed branches, like you're on a ship and you're on a ship and you're doing ship stuff. And then you're on the ground, you're over there. But we are so interconnected. So from a larger perspective, I think it's important that we do these events so that the American public is aware of the dangers to our armed
Yeah.
forces, our way of life. But on a micro perspective, just looking at who is Waco, what are we growing in this world of interglobal connectedness? I personally believe that we need to find our niche as a city,
Mhm.
and that's where we're going to grow. If you're just status quo, well, there's a million other cities that are status quo
Yeah.
because we're also globally dependent. So you have to find where is your niche. And we've done so well in advanced manufacturing, but I believe there is a lot of potential growth if we could double down in aerospace and space manufacturing. And I think that's where Waco needs to realize that.
Between the time that you talked to our chamber about that, and I learned more about, and it's a little bit of deviation, but it's not exactly, because it provides context for the whole Department of Defense, Department of War, and what's going on. It's all tied together. I did some research on that Palmer Luckey, that he sold Oculus. I had to look it up. He sold Oculus to the Oculus VR company to Facebook for like $2 billion.
Yeah.
And then 2017, he formed autonomy military technology company called Anduril, right? And I said that about the first part because he didn't really do it for the money. He's really interested in preservation of the country and society as we know it, because he is taking that technology and it goes towards autonomous vehicles, autonomous. There's a, I don't know if many people know, there's a company that's building autonomous boats for the Navy in Austin right now.
Yeah,
and they're about to put a port down where SpaceX is.
Brownsville.
Yeah,
$1 billion bill.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? First to think about that. But anyway, so there were some comments that kind of captured my attention as far as why it all plays together. A lot of it goes to what they're learning in real time, countries around the world in the Russia-Ukraine war, about how it's changed. We think, I grew up post-war Cold War mentality, and how wars were fought then, back to whoever can build the most carriers and that type of thing. But learning from the Ukraine-Russian war, all those assumptions have been turned down. In fact, in the last year or so, if you follow that, the Ukrainians really kind of turned it from using that kind of simple technology. They're building, they in the last year they've taken a truckload of low cost, drones, snuck them into the country, parked them right next to a field, and blew up $5 billion bombers with $500 drones and took them out while they're on the ground.
Yeah, I love that example.
Isn't that something?
It's Operation Spiderweb is what they called it, and it generally terrifies me. And because I get into these high level discussions, I was at a retreat last month with General Mattis. This past week I was with General Purdy, so it's a couple of admirals last month, and these are people who are at the top.
Yeah.
And they talk about Operation Spiderweb, and they say point blank, hey, this is probably already in the United States, a sleeper cell.
Yeah.
And we have no way to protect ourselves, or no way to know how to deal with it. And that's scary. And so, but our mentality shouldn't be fear. Rather, how can we change? How can we engage with the problem? And what I love about our American society is our ability to innovate, to get creative. And so, if we're being honest, the modern superpower that the United States is most at competition with, it's China. They are the equivalent. And in many ways, they have surpassed the United States in technology, in manufacturing, in industrialization. I've entered this kind of second seat in this place, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
And so but we're not going to beat them by being more like China. We have to be more like ourselves. We have to figure out, how do we innovate even further? And so when I started getting into this reindustrialization and this demand signal events for Army, Navy, Space Force, what excited me was, how can our local university, recently R1 Research, Baylor University, how can we engage in this conversation? Not strictly from a sense of, hey, let's make weapons, but actually there's this broader industrial base that needs to be creative. So we were nerding out on World War II right before we started talking. And World War II, and the reason U.S. did so well, is our ability to manufacture.
Yeah.
Now, one of the great architects of the World War II industrialization of the United States was a guy named Bill Knudsen, who was a Dane, who moved to the United States, and he basically figured out, he used all his connections to convince the major car companies to retool and to build American arms. Now, fast forward, it's been almost 100 years. We don't have the same car manufacturing ability to even retool, so that if we want to go into a war method. But even the modern technology that needs to be created couldn't be created on a car manufacturing assembly line. So we are in this brand new space of manufacturing where we need a broader reindustrialization, but has a military capability. But really, how do we just grow the economy at large?
Yeah.
And there's a great ability to innovate in there.
Yeah. We learned during COVID in supply chains that it's not a matter of money. If you get into a large scale war and you need lots of X missiles, drones, fighter jets, if you're set up, even if you have all the money in the world, if you have $1 trillion, you still can't manufacture them if you're not set
Yeah.
to manufacture them. If you don't have all the things it takes in place to do that.
Yeah.
And they talked about how I know the back to Cold War days, we had the visuals of these intercontinentalistic missiles, ICBMs. They could leave a tube and go halfway around the world. And they're saying, what's the purpose of these $1 billion systems when now with global economies, you can literally spend $600, put a device, in a pod or something, and ship it to New York City Harbor, put it in a truck and ship it. It's just the cost benefit ratio just is out of whack compared to those systems.
Yeah.
So it's all changed. It kind of falls into what you're talking about today. You don't have to be superpowered to be lethal nowadays.
Oh,
It's pretty
yeah.
pretty scary. In fact, they talked about literally they call it the Last Supper. After the Cold War, they had the Last Supper meeting with the Defense Department. Told defense industry, look, you got to get more efficiency. We're going to go from 50 to 60 companies down to 5 or 6.
Mhm.
Raytheons and General Dynamics, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And we similarly become like Russia. I think that Ukraine and Russia's geared up to, man, once they get it in that pipeline, they can build a lot of one thing. But what Ukraine is doing, they're going back in real time. They're changing their manufacturing needs for what they may be doing in 2 weeks or last month. Is completely changing the dynamics of their battlefield. That nimbleness that you talked about, innovation, and how we can turn that around. So
Mhm. So our conference on Thursday, Todd, it was about how does the Space Force industry engage in innovation, and it was great that I was here in Waco, and you asked me to go, why Baylor? A couple reasons. One is General Purdy, who's general in the U.S. Space Force, was a Baylor grad,
yeah,
so he was excited about the event. Texas Space Commission, Norman Garza, Brad Morrison, a couple others have been hosting events in Houston, Austin, Dallas, and they've been wanting to do something in Waco.
yeah,
And then it's just a central place. Like you talk about this all the time, Texas Triangle, I-35 corridor. And some of the initial feedback I got from people at the event was I loved being off the normal city tour.
yeah.
And Waco is pretty easy to get to. Like
Mhm.
some people say, like, there's no international airport. Like they just drove 90 minutes down. But at the event, what we had is about 300 people in the room, and the way we curate them is it's invite only. You can apply, anybody can apply, but we curate the room, and we want kind of 4 main areas. We want capital, we want government, we want founders, and we want academics. We don't want it to just be 300 like minds saying the same words over and over, but how can we actually engage a conversation where new ideas are being created? So all these people come to the room. We're at the Baylor Welcome Center, and we get all the procurement officers from the U.S. Space Force on the stage. So the people in charge of that $20 billion budget, $30 billion budget for the U.S. Space Force, the people in charge of buying the technology, deciding what is invested in. And they get up on stage and they say, hi, this is my name. Here's my budget. Here's where I'm looking to spend it. And just one by one, they get on and they say, the person in charge of satellites, the person in charge of innovation, the person in charge of cyber. And when they're done talking, we get mics and we run them around the room and people ask direct questions. And then in the afternoon, there were some additional panels. We had Gwynne Shotwell from SpaceX came and spoke. Of course, General Purdy spoke in the morning. But some keynote speakers in the afternoon. But while that was happening, we have office hours. So upstairs, you can get in a room 15 minutes with the procurement officer, the person in charge of spending money on your technology. You could earn 15 minutes with them. And that's the valuable time, is because normally what happens is, let's say you're a Waco, you're Blackhawk, you're in Waco, and you want to grow in this new technology. Well, you are just Googling around more than likely. How do I get in touch with someone? But we were wanting to bring the front door of Space Force loud and clear. Here's the front door. Here's how you go in. Here's how you get a cyber grant. Here's how you get a sitter. Here are the partners you can work with. So if you, as you scale your technology, I want to make it really clear, how do you partner with the government? And the government, no, not new here. They have a hard time communicating with us, right?
Mhm.
So as a nonprofit, we sit in the middle and say, hey, government, we see what you want to do. We're gonna help you communicate. And normally you're not that great at finding founders. We know the founders as from the VC side, the venture capital. We'll go out and find those founders and bring them to you. And we're just facilitating an open discussion, and we give snacks.
Yeah, it's funny you say it because I was reading the agenda. Really, I was kind of slow to understand this when I first heard. If you don't mind me just reading a few lines, I think it's so well worded, including the fact that they recognize the lack of nimbleness in government procurement.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So for the welcome remarks, I just be brief. It's an off-the-record format designed to foster frank, direct conversation that the demand signal model is built for. The remarks frame why the ability to innovate and scale space power faster than America's adversaries has become one of the central challenges for the 21st century national security. That's pretty direct. And it talks about General Purdy in his probably opening speech. Senior acquisition leader talks about where the Space Force capability stands today, where it must go, and what industry must deliver to close the gap.
Yeah.
Attendees should leave with a clear understanding of the Space Force's most urgent priorities and the acquisition pathways available to companies that can respond.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty clear. Somewhere here, they talked about how it's just not easy to develop those capacities in a government setting, and they need industry that's more nimble, as you said. And they also, this is kind of ominous. It talked about the introduction to SSIO leadership, which I don't know what that means, but it says, as the number of military, allied, and commercial satellites in orbit grows rapidly, the challenge of making them work together has become one of the Space Force's most consequential engineering acquisition problems. The Space Systems Integration Office is tasked with ensuring interoperability across the increasingly complex enterprise. And these are the words that got me. And to deny that advantage to our adversaries.
Yeah.
It's serious business.
Yeah. So a common thing that was discussed was there are founders out there inventing cool things, and radars and solar and energy and fusion, and a handful of people who are designing specific propulsion system to change the orbit trajectory for satellites. But usually what happens is they invent something cool. They get super excited about it. Imagine a 26-year-old guy, maybe he's got 2 people on his team, and they just run to the US government and they say, I created something really awesome. And the government says, we need that, but how do we integrate that? And we don't want just a whole bunch of great ideas on a platform together. How do we integrate these from the beginning? So the government, they're not going to be able to integrate that technology. Someone has to do it for them. So from the very beginning, we got to communicate to our founders. It has to be able to be integrated. It has to be protected, cyber security. And then you have to design with scale in mind. You can't just design thinking, oh, I need 5 of these. No, we need to be thinking on the manufacturing line, creating 10,000 of these. Are we designing the initial product so they can be scaled in mass?
It's the NASA administrator said, prove that the government could buy outcomes rather than build hardware.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. They mentioned Artemis. It's so strange, and I'm a little bit older than you, but so strange to see private company in that space. We always thought government, NASA, whatever. But they said they're now in the business of buying outcomes and rather than producing things.
Yeah, there's a company just down the road in Austin called Firefly.
Yeah.
230 plus acre campus, super cool. So Jason Kim, one of the founder, was at our event. And you think about, we just so naturally assume, oh, NASA is the one that's going to get people to the moon, so they're in charge of it. Great. Well, Firefly was tasked with building the lunar module. So this is NASA looking out and saying, how do we get to the moon? Well, we got to partner with the commercial industry. NASA alone has over 400 procurement officers. So their team in charge of buying all the parts, over 400 people. That's just NASA. Then you have that or more for Navy, Army, all these others, but those branches aren't necessarily working together. So there has to be a clear communication, clear forum for these people to partner together to get these technologies off the ground and integrated.
It said Space Force has made accelerated commercial acquisition a strategic priority. And here's where they kind of admit. But converting that intent into fielded capability remains a significant challenge. Acquisition timelines, budget cycles, and risk tolerance inside government often move at a pace incompatible with the commercial market.
Yeah.
This session brings together acquisition leaders and commercial operators to examine the tools, authorities, and contracting models that are actually closing the gap. They're recognizing that they can't move fast enough.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gwen Shotwell, as far as ties back to why Central Texas.
Yeah.
I say our own SpaceX, they're not our own, but certainly their facility, testing facilities in McGregor, but with them moving their headquarters to Texas. It says few executives done more to reshape the economics of space than Gwen Shotwell, president and CEO of SpaceX. Under her leadership, they've driven launch costs down by an order of magnitude, fielded the largest satellite constellation in history, and emerged as indispensable part of U.S. national security space. So they recognize that private industry is really the way to go, and they want to do more of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she was so approachable. I was so surprised, the way she interacted and talked, very candid. And then we had time for questions on the back end, and people were asking, "Gwen, tell me this," and she was so straightforward. And there was one guy who stood up and he asked a question. He said, "I'm 19 years old. I'm trying to do this," and it was kind of a silly question, but she didn't belittle him. She was very straightforward, like, "That's a great question," and she spun it into the question I think it needed to be, and she answered it,
yeah,
and, man, um, so impressed with her. One thing that stood out to me is that she's constantly pushing the SpaceX team to be innovative, and she's trying to push them to do really hard things, and if they ask for a budget, she knows how much to give them and when to not give them enough just to stretch the creativity a little bit more. A lot of her feedback to people in the crowd was, "You need to find a team that can work hard and make them work hard,
yeah,
not find some smart people and give them everything they need." It's like, find some smart people and give them 80% of what they need,
yeah.
and then let creativity and the pressure actually refine your product.
They actually give a big shout out here to Central Texas. The Texas case study
Mhm.
actually was a segment in there, and it says Texas is home of the some of the most consequential actors in U.S. commercial space, from launch providers, satellite manufacturers, ground systems operators. You mentioned Firefly. I was at an economic conference in Georgetown.
Yeah.
Actually, it was around anyway, Williamson County, and they had speakers up there, and they had the big screen behind them, about the business of the speakers. And I wasn't paying attention. I was talking to people and how this rocket stuff. And I thought, oh, there's going to be somebody from SpaceX here.
Yeah.
The speaker was from Firefly. I didn't even know they existed. I was like, I'm the last to know, but there's a lot of that goes on there. But they talk about this session examines what Texas has built, how it's done so, and what the model means for national security. So just the fact, I think, for other people considering it, it's like a lot of our economic development successes here. There's something to the fact that when people come here and see that, a Knopf Insulation has invested $1 billion in property, plant, and equipment, or graphics packaging, $600 million or $1 billion. They see these big deals. They know there's a lot went into that. There has to be an infrastructure there. Everything from infrastructure to all the entities have to come together to make it happen. You don't just have a pasture and put that property there.
Yeah.
So I think to some degree it's probably happened here. When they see those companies here, they know that there's infrastructure, probably workforce and those kind of things that you can do it here along with the
Yeah.
other factors.
I keep preaching the good work of TSCC over and over. What Beth Wooten has done over there, just in Bellmead, just north of town, is
Yeah.
if you need workforce development, Waco has it.
Yeah.
If you need a specialized program for your manufacturing company, we will make it for you.
Yeah.
If you need welders, people working with the robots, software, electrical, anything, like, we have the workforce development. And it puts Waco in a very unique circumstance to fill the gaps in this reindustrialization that's happening. Waco is growing. Texas is growing rapidly,
Yeah.
and they need people who can work hard. Like, there's AI is gonna take everyone's jobs. Like, it will change the type of jobs we have. I don't think it's gonna just eliminate and put, millions of people out of work. We're in a country that innovates, so we're gonna pivot. People are gonna find new ways to do things, but there needs to be people on the ground making things. And so, as these companies, when you see big ideas like SpaceX, what they have in Firefly, they had to make that stuff somewhere,
Yeah.
and they're gonna start coming to Waco.
I'm sure you've walked to the facility, the collaboration between the city, the county, and TSTC out there in the industrial park, where they actually have beautiful facilities out there where students, they will set up a line specific for the industry. If the industry needs, hey, I need this type of, line done, process taught, or whatever. It's a big open space with all facilities, and they can set up a line and run it and teach them and train them on it specific to that industry.
Mm.
It's really a cool thing. So that's kind of ties back to why Baylor and why Central Texas and what here. What do you think it means for the future of industry and leadership along this corridor in Central Texas in particular? Like, you talked about what skills are going to matter, what industry is about to change, adaptability. What do you see in that area? Why is it such Why is it so important for our future to get out ahead of this?
So Waco, spring break, a couple months back.
Yeah.
Take my 3-year-old and 5-year-old down to Corpus. We're in Port Aransas for a couple days enjoying the sun. And I grew up in Austin. We both spent a lot of time on I-35, but this one trip, the drive home from Corpus to Waco, we drove up to San Antonio and we got an I-35 all the way to Waco. And from San Antonio to basically Temple, it is a nonstop city. And I couldn't believe it. It felt like every 2 minutes I looked to my right and my left, and there's another 400 unit apartment
Yeah.
complex. Just constant. It doesn't let up till you get almost to Temple.
Mhm.
And so it's moving this direction. The land is cheap. The manufacturing is coming here at this mega city of the United States, this Texas Triangle. It's hitting Waco really soon. But we can't just say, oh, we'll coast on the growth of Texas.
Yeah.
If you've seen gas prices go up because of the Strait of Hormuz or tariffs with China, everyone should know that our economy locally is dependent on the economy of the United States and the world at large. We are all connected. And so in a connected world, I can't just build an office space in downtown Waco and say, oh, someone's going to fill it up eventually. What I have to do is I actually have to look at my unique geography and skill set and wonder, what can I do that will make me different? In a world where you can go on AI and you can Google anything, how do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah.
And so we need to, as a city, be nimble, but also be, I don't know if aggressive is the right word. We need to be strategic in choosing what's our lane,
Mm.
and how are we going to grow in it. We can't just say we want to be all things to all people. Well, if you're not an A player, you're irrelevant.
Yeah.
They don't call B level players to go sit before Senate and give advice. They don't invite B level players to be on the board. You got to be an A player. So Waco, Baylor, what are we being an A player in? We got to choose that, and we need to double down because that's how we're going to be known for the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. The telling sign for me was years ago, talking about that same drive. You remember seeing those huge brand new warehouses going up there. A couple years ago, someone was telling, like, who is putting that in? I was thinking there's some company about it. The bulk of it was all spec warehousing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and from a banker's perspective, like, who is betting on speculative warehousing of that size, just everywhere you could see?
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me, the people that are doing that, they're getting ahead of what they know what's coming. When they see certain elements of population shift and manufacturing and things, they know the space is going to need and logistics and all that. So they're seeing it. They were putting that stuff up a couple of years ago. I was like, and what seemed like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And now there's not there are logos on all those buildings. I was like, I would have never done that. So I'm too conservative, I guess. But that's a component. And you kind of answered my last question. Is, what are the risks of these constituents that you talk about, academic, the municipalities, county, city, business leadership, education? What are the risks of standing still?
Yeah.
And just letting it pass by.
Yeah, a common thing that we've experienced in our community the last few years is our water quality from nearby counties, pollution from the dairy farms. And when that's become an issue, we go to Austin and we lobby and we say, protect our water quality. But if you're just another drop in the pond, your voice is not very loud. We need to find what our voices, what are we an expert to? Why do we matter to the Texas economy? So that we're not just, oh, those light manufacturing folks in Waco. No, it's like those advanced logistics folks in Waco, those advanced manufacturing, the welder creation of Texas in Waco. Those are the people who need clean water, and we got to listen to them.
Mm.
So if we're, and this is a little over the top, but I think as Waco, I love this community. I graduated from Baylor, lived briefly in northern Colorado, moved back to Waco because we love the size of the city, the heart of the people. And I'll frequently meet people who say, I love Waco and I want it to never change. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll think, yes, but also that's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like you either grow or you die.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that's extreme, but the point being, in a global economy, you don't just homeostasis is not a thing.
Yeah, you've heard this phrase so many times. If you're not growing, you die. It's going to change. It's
Yeah.
just going to change in a positive way or negative way. 'Cause I know in smaller communities, when the industrial base goes away, all the tax base relies on homeowners, then they cap out because of
Mhm.
age, and water systems, all that, just all those public services start degrading because they don't have a tax base.
Yeah.
So it's gonna change. It's just, are you gonna change it in a positive way or a negative way?
Yeah.
Back to the water thing, here's some I don't, for my age, I shouldn't be surprised as much as I am, but I was surprised. I was I'm in a peer forum group, with a banker down in Corpus Christi, and he's either president, elected position of the or chairman of the Port Authority down there. He was talking about these water issues. I had no idea. They've just gone through or they're in a huge drought, Corpus, big problem. Uh, he said one of the solutions is a desalination plant.
Yeah.
I think desalination plant of 30 years ago just not that viable, or 50 years ago, whatever. He said, no, very viable. Viable. The technology's there. It's an Israeli company. It builds. They built them all in the Middle East and all stuff. Very viable. All that. But back to the government's governance thing, he said they have a plan to build a desalination plant there that could feed the water rights there, and if they really want to take them down the coast, could
Mm.
fill the water rights of Texas by using. The problem with that has not been the math has not been. Uh, it's it's been not the desalination plants, but getting it to the place it needs to be.
Yes.
So they have a plan or formulating a plan to use the interstate highway corridors for right of ways.
Mm.
Think I-35, I-45
Yeah.
systems. Those corridors to get it to where it needs to go. The biggest thing that the hurdle they've run into is licensing and permitting and things. Like in Europe or Middle East, they can build them. They can redump the salt like at the station. There, they're being asked to take it 20 miles out to sea, underwater deal. It's going to cost them $600 million or something. It just takes the economics out. So they're fighting all that. My point is that reliance, that part of public policy is a part of the equation too. And that's
Mm.
why this leadership, having got people in leadership that cares and understands those things, why it's all part that people participate in that, because those kind of things can make or break what goes on. And even here and up and down here with the, industrial parks, utilities, all those things it takes to make it all work. It has to all fit together.
Yeah.
So they have pieces, but he's frustrated. Like, we're right there. We just can't get it. We got to get across the finish line and make an impact it because they're having such problems. But that I've been impressed, Jon Mark, your forward thinking, those kind of things. One of the biggest takeaways from preparing for this is that the future isn't something that you just have to wait and watch happen. You can actually impact it.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me that you've been a part. I know it was more than you, but a big part of a group that brought this thing here. Really forward looking. Uh, just to sum up, big takeaways from there. Any how did we do as a community as far as the chance of bringing it back? What we don't want to do is to move down to Austin or somewhere. Did,
Yeah.
did that did that work well for them as far as coming in? I know it's like a 1 day symposium, but did that work well? Did we learn some things from that? Do they hope of doing it again,
Yeah.
or with other defense contractors besides Space Force? What's happening there?
Waco did a great job.
Okay.
Chamber did a great job. Baylor did a wonderful job. All equally. And we had our get together at Red Herring, rent out the whole
Yeah.
hotel and the restaurant bar, and heard from a number of people, "Wow, this is Waco?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yes, praise
Yeah.
God." They are seeing us in a different light. And then some feedback being, "Wow, so glad to get off of the normal circuit,
Yeah.
the normal cities." And something that we didn't take it lightly. I'm very proud of us when we said, "Okay, we're going to host the Space Force, the city." We all bent over backwards to do a great job hosting, and I think it showed.
Oh, good.
So great initial feedback. We just got to get some feedback from the other, the academics, VC, capital founders, all these, like, was it good for them too? Um, but initial feedback is great. And we can't be all things to all people. So Signal to Band group, we've done 3 of these events for the Navy so far this year. We did one for the Army last year. We're doing another one for the Navy in next month. This one for Space Force, playing one for Transcom. We got to choose our niche. If you try and take all of them, then it doesn't mean a lot.
Mhm.
Choose your niche. So is it Space Force? We have a chance to jump on this and say, we really want to own this and year over year do this well. I think there's a chance.
Can you mention lastly about change? My response at the time was the hosting the event, everything here certainly, but as far as all that can come out of it, we don't need to be small minded about trying to hold it all to Waco. We need it to develop all the way down, up and down out there for corridor because we'll benefit from that.
Yeah.
It's too big. It's too big for Waco alone. The industry that's going to have to support all this is going to be up and down the corridor, and when that goes, the water levels rise all
Yeah,
boats. And
when you're
that,
short-sighted and you're just thinking, "How does this Waco win from this?" You push yourself to look for a certain outcome, and inevitably you mess with the pro forma. But you're right. Like if Temple grows, that's great for
that's
Waco.
right.
If Hillsborough grows, that's great for Waco. Hillsborough's getting a Chick-fil-A and a Chili's, and I'm praise God. Or people are gonna value driving up I-35, and long term, as Texas grows, we will benefit.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your leadership in bringing this to Waco and willing to share with us today. We hear and say all the time, well, there's all these things going on, but this is a good example of the detail of what's going on, not just saying good stuff happening. Well, thanks a lot, John Mark, for
Todd,
coming in.
so good.
All right.
Thank you for having me.